Would you report your boss for embezzling millions if it meant risking your own job and career? The spreadsheet error was tiny, a decimal point in the wrong place on a vendor invoice, the kind of thing you'd normally fix without thinking twice. Mark as a typo, move on with your day. Except this wasn't the first time I'd seen this particular vendor's invoices have errors. And when I pulled up the payment history to double-check the correction, something didn't add up. I'm a senior accountant at a mid-sized manufacturing company. Been there 6 years. Started right out of college as a junior analyst, worked my way up through being detail-oriented and reliable. The kind of employee who shows up early, stays late when needed, catches mistakes before they become problems. My boss, Chen, had been the CFO for 8 years. He'd hired me, mentored me, promoted me twice, wrote glowing performance reviews, recommended me for bonuses. He was the reason I had a career, which made what I was looking at even impossible to process. The vendor was called Pinnacle Solutions LLC. They provided consulting services, according to our records, monthly invoices ranging from $30,000 to $50,000, always approved by Richard, always paid within days. I'd processed probably 100 of these invoices over the years, never questioned them. Why would I? Richard approved them. They came through official channels. They had proper documentation. But this decimal point error made me actually look at the numbers. And when I looked, I noticed something strange. The invoices always came on the last Friday of the month. Always, without fail, for 60 consecutive months. That felt wrong, too consistent, too perfect. I did what any accountant would do. I looked up the vendor in our system. Address listed was a P.O. box in Delaware. Phone number went to a generic voicemail. Email was a Gmail account. Red flags. Huge red flags. I searched for Pinnacle Solutions LLC online. Nothing. No website. No business listings, no presence anywhere. A consulting company billing us $40,000 a month with zero online presence in 2025? Impossible. I checked the Delaware business registry. Pinnacle Solutions LLC existed, registered 5 years ago. Registered agent was a corporate services company. Owner listed as Richard Chen. My boss. My mentor. The person who'd built my career, had created a shell company and was billing our employer, potentially stealing from our company, for 5 years. I sat at my desk staring at that business registration for probably 20 minutes, just staring, trying to make it make sense in a way that wasn't fraud. Maybe it was legitimate. Maybe Richard had disclosed this. Maybe the company knew and approved it as some kind of consulting arrangement. I pulled up the corporate governance documents, conflict of interest policies, related party transaction disclosures. Nothing. No disclosure of Richard owning a vendor, no board approval of payments to a Richard-owned entity, nothing that would make this legitimate. I calculated the total payments, 60 months, average of $40,000 a month, $2.4 million, approximately $2.4 million paid to a company owned by our employer with no actual services rendered, no disclosure, no board approval. My boss had stolen $2.4 million from our company. I closed my laptop, went to the bathroom, splashed water on my face, tried to think clearly. If I reported this, what happened? Richard would be fired, probably prosecuted, his career would be over, his life would be destroyed. And me? I'd be the whistleblower who took down the CFO, the person who couldn't be trusted to keep quiet, career poison in the corporate world. But if I didn't report it, I was complicit. I knew about fraud and said nothing. That made me an accessory. That could destroy my career and potentially land me in jail. I went back to my desk and started documenting everything. Screenshots of the invoices, the business registration, the payment history, the lack of disclosure. Every piece of evidence I could find. Then I did something that felt insane. I started looking for more. If Richard was stealing through one shell company, maybe there were others. I pulled every vendor we'd paid more than $10,000 in the last 5 years, cross-referenced them against Delaware and Nevada business registries, the most common states for shell companies. I found 3 more. Apex Strategic Consulting, owner, Richard Chen, $25,000 a month for 4 years, $1.2 million total. Summit Advisory Group, owner, Richard Chen, $15,000 a month for 3 years, $540,000 total. Zenith Management Solutions, owner, Richard Chen, $20,000 a month for 2 years, $480,000 total. Total theft, $4.62 million over 5 years. $4.5 million. My boss had systematically stolen $4.5 million from our company, and I was apparently the first person to notice. I felt sick, actually physically sick. This was the person I'd admired, who I'd trusted, who'd been committing massive fraud the entire time I'd known him. I spent the rest of that day in a fog, going through motions, processing invoices, attending meetings, acting normal while my brain screamed that nothing was normal. Richard stopped by my desk around 4 p.m. "Hey, got a minute? I wanted to talk about the Q3 projections." I looked up at him, at this person I'd admired, who I'd trusted, who'd been stealing millions while pretending to be a mentor. "Sure," I said. "Just finish this email." We went to his office, he closed the door, pulled up spreadsheet on his screen, talked about revenue forecasts and expense projections like he was a legitimate CFO instead of a criminal. I nodded in the right places, took notes, asked clarifying questions, performed normalcy while knowing exactly what he was. "You seem distracted," he said at one point. "Everything okay?" "Fine, just tired. Didn't sleep well last night." "Well, don't work too late. Work-life balance is important." The hypocrisy was stunning. Life advice from someone who'd been committing felony fraud for 5 years. I left his office and went straight to the general counsel. Not my boss, not HR, the company's lawyer. Her name was Patricia Moore, early 50s, sharp, no nonsense, the kind of person who didn't tolerate bullshit. "Do you have time for a confidential conversation?" I asked, standing in her doorway. She looked up from her computer, read something in my expression. "Close the door." I sat down and opened my laptop, turned it toward her, showed her everything I'd found. She didn't say anything for a long time, just looked at the evidence, the business registrations, the invoices, the calculations. Finally, "How long have you known about this?" "I found it this morning, started digging deeper this afternoon. I'm showing you everything I have." "Have you told anyone else?" "No one." "Good. Don't. Don't tell anyone about this conversation. You don't change your behavior around Richard. You especially don't tip him off that we're investigating. Can you do that?" "For how long?" "Week, maybe 2. We need to get external auditors in to verify. We need to quantify the exact amount of theft. We need to build an airtight case before we confront him. If he gets wind of this before we're ready, he could destroy evidence or flee." "Flee? You really think?" "He stole $4.5 million. Yes, I think he might flee." The next 2 weeks were psychological torture. Going to work every day, sitting in meetings with Richard, listening to him talk about fiscal responsibility and fiduciary duty, while knowing he'd stolen millions. The external auditors came in under the guise of a routine audit. Richard didn't suspect anything. Why would he? We did annual audits. This just seemed early. I watched them work, watched them pull the same records I'd pulled, watched them find the same shell companies, watched them calculate the same totals. Except their totals were higher. They found 2 more shell companies I'd missed, older ones from before I'd started working there. Total theft, $6.2 million over 8 years. $6 million. Richard had been stealing since the year he was hired as CFO, It wasn't a recent lapse in judgment or a financial emergency. It was systematic, premeditated fraud from day one. Patricia called me into her office on day 12. The external audit team was there, the CEO was there, the board chair was there. "We've verified everything," Patricia said. "It's worse than we thought. We're terminating Richard tomorrow morning and filing criminal charges immediately. The FBI is already involved." The FBI? This had escalated to federal fraud charges. "We need you to testify," the CEO said. "You're the one who found it. The prosecution will need your testimony about the discovery and the evidence." "Okay," he continued. "I want you to know that this company is grateful for your integrity. You could have looked the other way. Many people would have. Instead, you did the right thing, and that took courage." I didn't feel courageous. I felt nauseated. "What happens to me? After this goes public, after Richard is arrested, what happens to my career?" Patricia answered, "In the short term, nothing. You keep your job. You continue your work. We'll need you to help the new CFO understand the systems and processes. Long term, this makes you incredibly valuable. You're the accountant who caught a $6 million fraud. That's a career-making event, not a career-ending one." I wanted to believe her, but I had heard the stories. Whistleblowers who got quietly pushed out, people who did the right thing and paid for it professionally. "I've already spoken to several board members," the CEO added. "Everyone agrees that you should be protected and rewarded, not punished. We're considering a promotion and a significant bonus for uncovering this." A promotion? For destroying my mentor's life. The next morning, Richard came to work like any other day, stopped at my desk around 9 a.m. like he always did. "Morning, how was your weekend?" "Good, quiet. Yours?" "Same. Hey, can you pull the Apex Strategic invoices for me? I need to review something." Apex Strategic, one of his shell companies. He was asking me to pull evidence of his own fraud. "Sure, I'll send them over." "Thanks. Oh, and we have that budget meeting at 10, don't forget." He'd never make it to that meeting. At 9:30, Patricia and the CEO called him into the conference room. I watched from my desk as he walked in, relaxed and unsuspecting. The door closed. Through the glass walls, I saw him sit down, saw them slide papers across the table, saw his face change as he read. Confusion, then understanding, then panic. He stood up, started talking fast, gesturing. I couldn't hear through the glass, but I could read the body language. Denial, excuses, desperation. Patricia said something, pointed at the papers. Richard sat back down heavily. The conference room door opened. 2 FBI agents walked in. I hadn't even seen them arrive. One of them said something to Richard. He stood up slowly. They walked him out of the conference room, through the office, past my desk. He looked at me as they passed, made eye contact, and in that moment, I saw him understand. I'd found it, I'd reported it, I'd destroyed him. His face contorted, rage, betrayal, hatred. "You," he said, stopping in front of my desk, despite the FBI agent trying to move him along. "You fucking did this." "Keep moving," the agent said. "I gave you everything. I hired you, I promoted you, I made your career, and this is how you repay me? Mr. Chen, you need to come with us. She's the one you should be arresting. She's probably been stealing too. Check her accounts. Check her—" The agent physically moved him toward the exit, but Richard kept talking, voice rising, accusations getting wilder. Everyone in the office was staring, watching the CFO get arrested, watching him accuse me, watching the spectacle. I sat at my desk, hands shaking, trying not to cry. After they left, Patricia came over. "You okay?" "Not really." "That was hard. I'm sorry you had to see that. For what it's worth, his lawyer will tell him to stop talking immediately. Those accusations won't go anywhere." Everyone thinks I did something wrong now. Everyone heard him. Which is why we're having an all-hands meeting in 10 minutes. The CEO is going to explain exactly what happened and make it clear that you're a hero, not a criminal. The meeting was surreal. The CEO stood in front of the entire company and explained that Richard had been terminated for fraud.
that an employee, he didn't name me but everyone knew, had discovered the theft and reported it, that the company was grateful for that employee's integrity. People clapped, actually clapped, like I'd done something praiseworthy instead of destroying someone's life. Afterwards, coworkers stopped by my desk, congratulated me, thanked me, told me I did the right thing. But a few people avoided eye contact, a few people who'd been close to Richard, who probably thought I'd betrayed him, who probably thought I should have warned him or covered for him or something. I went home that night and collapsed, just completely fell apart, cried for hours. Not because I regretted what I'd done, but because it was finally over. The stress of knowing, the fear of reporting, the terror of those 2 weeks acting normal, all of it hit me at once. My phone buzzed, text from an unknown number. I hope you're happy. You destroyed my life. I'll never forgive you. You're dead to me. Richard, from whatever phone they'd let him use after processing. I blocked the number. But the message stayed in my head. I destroyed his life. That part was true. He'd destroyed it himself by stealing millions, but I'd been the one who pulled the trigger on consequences. Over the next few days, the story went public. CFO arrested for embezzling $6.2 million made regional news. Some articles mentioned that an employee had discovered the fraud. My name stayed out of it, but anyone in my industry could figure out who I was. My LinkedIn inbox flooded. Recruiters wanting to hire the accountant who caught the fraud, job offers, interview requests, speaking invitations. Patricia had been right. This was career-making, not career-ending. But it didn't feel like success. It felt like I'd survived something traumatic.
Richard's trial was scheduled for 8 months after his arrest. The prosecution offered him a plea deal: plead guilty, cooperate fully, return what he could of the stolen money, and get 12 years instead of 20. He rejected it, decided to fight the charges, claim the shell companies were legitimate, claim he'd disclosed everything, claim it was all a misunderstanding. Which meant I had to testify, had to sit on a witness stand and explain how I'd found the fraud, had to be cross-examined by his defense attorney, had to face him in court. The prosecution prepared me for weeks: mock testimony, practice cross-examination, learning how to answer questions precisely without volunteering extra information. His attorney will try to make you look incompetent or biased, the prosecutor explained, will suggest you made mistakes, will imply you had personal motives for reporting him. Stay calm, stick to facts. Don't let them rattle you. The trial started on a Monday in October. I showed up in my best suit, hands shaking, stomach churning. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected. Richard sat at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit. He'd been denied bail as a flight risk. He wouldn't look at me. I was the prosecution's star witness, the person who'd found the evidence, the credible employee with no motive to lie. They walked me through the discovery, how I'd found the decimal error, how that led to investigating Pinnacle Solutions, how I'd found the business registration, how I'd found the other shell companies. And what did you do after discovering this information? The prosecutor asked. I documented everything and reported it to our general counsel immediately. Why did you report it? Because it was fraud, theft. It was my ethical and legal obligation to report it. Were you concerned about the professional consequences of reporting your boss? Yes, but doing the right thing mattered more than protecting my career. Perfect testimony. Exactly what we'd practiced. Then came cross-examination. Richard's attorney was exactly what you'd expect: expensive suit, condescending tone, ready to make me look bad. Ms. Rodriguez, you've testified that you discovered this alleged fraud, but isn't it true that you had access to these invoices for years? Yes. So why didn't you notice the pattern earlier? I had no reason to investigate vendor invoices that had been approved by the CFO. I trusted that approvals meant legitimacy. But you're a senior accountant. Isn't it your job to question irregularities?
It's my job to process properly approved invoices. The irregularities only became apparent when I investigated further after finding an error. An error you claim to have found. How convenient that this error led you to discover evidence against your boss right around the time you were passed over for a promotion. Objection from the prosecution. Sustained. The jury was instructed to disregard. But the seed was planted. The defense was suggesting I'd made this up out of spite. Isn't it true that you applied for a promotion to controller 6 months before reporting Mr. Chen? Yes. And isn't it true that Mr. Chen recommended someone else for that position? He recommended the candidate he thought was most qualified. How did you feel about that decision? Disappointed, but I respected his judgment. Disappointed enough to fabricate evidence against him? Objection. Sustained. Counsel, move on. The attorney changed tactics. These shell companies you allege Mr. Chen created, isn't it possible they were legitimate consulting firms? They had no web presence, no actual business operations, and were owned by the owner who's also the client. That's the definition of a shell company. But you're not a forensic accountant, are you? You don't have expertise in determining whether companies are legitimate. I don't need forensic expertise to recognize that a company with no employees, no office, no services rendered, and an owner who's also the client is fraudulent. That's your opinion, but you're not an expert. The FBI and external auditors confirmed my findings. They are experts. Back and forth for 2 hours. The defense trying to make me look biased, incompetent, or vindictive. Me sticking to facts, staying calm, not taking the bait. Finally, redirect from the prosecution. Ms. Rodriguez, did you benefit financially from reporting this fraud? No, I received my normal salary and a standard annual bonus. Did you receive a promotion as the defense suggested you wanted? Not immediately. I was promoted 6 months later based on my performance, not as a reward for whistleblowing. Do you have any personal animosity towards Mr. Chen? I was disappointed that someone I respected had committed fraud, but my report was based on evidence, not emotions. Thank you. No further questions. I stepped down from the witness stand, walked past Richard without looking at him, went straight to the bathroom and threw up from stress. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The defense called character witnesses who testified that Richard was honest and ethical, called accounting experts who tried to suggest the shell companies might have been legitimate, called colleagues who claimed Richard had mentioned the consulting firms to them. But the evidence was overwhelming. Business registrations in Richard's name, bank records showing the money going to accounts he controlled, email evidence of him creating fake invoices, 8 years of systematic theft documented in excruciating detail. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts. Wire fraud, tax evasion, money laundering, theft. Sentencing was scheduled for 2 months later. Richard's attorney immediately filed appeals, but everyone knew they wouldn't work. I didn't attend the sentencing, didn't want to see him one more time, didn't want to hear him try to blame me again, but I read the transcript later. Richard had given a statement, blamed the company for not paying him enough, blamed the stress of his job, blamed his expensive divorce 3 years ago, blamed me for vindictively destroying him instead of talking to him first. The judge hadn't been sympathetic. Mr. Chen, you held a position of trust. You were the CFO of a company that employed hundreds of people. Instead of honoring that trust, you systematically stole over $6 million for your personal benefit. You created elaborate schemes to hide your theft. You showed no remorse even when caught. And now, in this courtroom, you continue to blame everyone but yourself. 18 years in federal prison, ordered to pay full restitution plus penalties, nearly $8 million total, forfeiture of all assets, professional licenses revoked. His career was over. His freedom was gone. His life as he knew it was destroyed. because I'd found a decimal point error and decided to investigate.
3 years have passed since I reported Richard. 3 years since that day I found the error that unraveled everything. The company promoted me to controller 18 months ago, not because I was a whistleblower, but because I'd proven myself competent and trustworthy. I got the promotion on merit, though I'm sure the fraud discovery didn't hurt. I've testified at 2 other fraud trials since then. Companies that heard about my case brought me in as an expert witness. I've consulted on forensic accounting investigations. I've spoken at conferences about fraud detection. I've built a career on the worst day of Richard's life. That's hard to live with sometimes. Not because I regret reporting him, I don't. He stole $6 million. He deserved prison. But because I've profited from his downfall in ways I never anticipated. I got a speaking fee last month that was more than my entire first-year salary for telling the story of how I discovered fraud, for being the person who did the right thing. It feels strange, being celebrated for something that destroyed someone's life, even though that someone destroyed their own life through their choices. Richard's appeals were all denied. He's in federal prison in Pennsylvania. Earliest possible release is in 11 years, when he'll be 68 years old. His professional life is over, his reputation is ruined, his family disowned him, his wife divorced him, his adult children won't speak to him. I heard through former colleagues that he works in the prison library, helps other inmates with their legal appeals. Apparently, he's found some kind of purpose in there. I don't know how I feel about that. Don't know if I'm supposed to feel satisfied or guilty or vindicated or what. Mostly, I just feel tired when I think about it. My therapist says that's normal, that whistleblowing is traumatic even when you're in the right, that I'm allowed to have complicated feelings about the consequences of my actions, even though my actions were correct. Some of my old colleagues still avoid me, people who were friends with Richard, people who think I should have warned him or given him a chance to explain, people who believe loyalty to a colleague matters more than loyalty to the company or to the law. I've lost friendships over this, lost professional relationships. There are people in my industry who won't work with me because I'm the whistleblower, and that makes me untrustworthy in their eyes. But I've gained more than I've lost. Job offers, speaking opportunities, respect from people who value integrity, a reputation as someone who can't be corrupted. Is it worth it? I don't know. Some days yes, some days no. Last week, I got a letter from Richard, from prison. I almost didn't open it, almost threw it away, but curiosity won. It was surprisingly coherent, not angry like his text after the arrest, not accusatory, just reflective. He wrote about how prison had given him time to think, how he'd been in therapy, working through what led him to steal, how he understood now that it started small, padding an expense report here, a small unapproved payment there, and grew until it consumed him. He wrote that he didn't blame me anymore, that I'd done what any ethical person should do, that he blamed himself for putting me in that position. He wrote that he hoped I was doing well, that he hoped my career was thriving, that he hoped I didn't carry guilt for his imprisonment, because the guilt should be his alone. And then, at the end, "You were always one of the best accountants I worked with. I wasn't lying about that, even though I was lying about everything else. I'm sorry I put you in an impossible situation. I'm sorry I forced you to choose between your integrity and your loyalty. I'm glad you chose integrity. The world needs more people like you." I cried reading that letter, full-on sobbed at my kitchen table, because it was the closure I didn't know I needed, permission from the person I'd destroyed to stop feeling guilty about destroying him. I don't know if I'll write back, don't know what I'd say, don't know if maintaining any contact with him is healthy or appropriate, but I kept the letter, put it in a folder with all the other documents from that time, evidence that the story has an ending, even if it's complicated. People ask me sometimes if I'd do it again,
If I could go back to that morning when I found the decimal error, knowing everything that would follow, would I still investigate? Yes, without question, yes. Because the alternative was being complicit in theft, was letting Richard steal millions while I looked the other way, was betraying hundreds of colleagues whose retirement funds and jobs depended on the company's financial health. Richard stole from people who trusted him, from employees who'd worked hard and deserved to have their employer financially stable, from vendors who were being paid less because money was being diverted to Richard's pockets. Reporting him wasn't about destroying his life, it was about protecting everyone else's. That's what I have to remember when the guilt creeps in, when I wonder if I should have handled it differently, when I see his name in the news about prison reform or white-collar crime. I didn't destroy Richard. Richard destroyed Richard. I just refused to help him cover it up. The company recovered most of the money. Richard's assets were seized and sold, his house, his cars, his investment accounts. About $4 million was recovered. The rest was gone, spent on his lifestyle over 8 years. The company used the recovered money to fund an ethics training program, implemented better internal controls, created a whistleblower protection policy with my input, made sure what happened with Richard couldn't happen again. Something good came from something terrible. That counts for something. I still work in accounting, still love the precision of it, the way numbers tell stories if you know how to read them, the satisfaction of finding errors and fixing them. But I'm more careful now, more aware. I look at approved invoices with suspicious eyes. I investigate anomalies. I ask questions that make people uncomfortable, because I know what I'm looking for. I know what fraud looks like, and I know I have the courage to report it if I find it again. Would I report my boss for embezzling millions if it meant risking my own job and career? I did, and I'd do it again. Not because I'm a hero, not because I'm fearless, but because integrity matters more than comfort. Because doing the right thing is worth the cost, even when the cost is high. Richard is in prison, my career is thriving, the company is stronger, the story has an ending. It's not a happy ending for everyone, but it's the right ending. And sometimes that's all you can ask for.